Okay, so there's been some chatter in the music production world. The chatter is, are DAW stock plugins just as good as third-party plugins? Like everyone in this music production space, we all tend to sort of like hinge onto like a fabulous third-party plugin, at least the plugin we think that's fabulous. Maybe it's a compression plugin and it does that glue thing really well. Or maybe it's a reverb plugin. Maybe it's a tape saturation plugin. I don't know. But I was that person as well. I had a lot of third-party plugins. I've had probably, I'm saying I've had because we'll get to that. But I used to use a lot of Wave plugins. I think I probably had, I don't know, maybe 50 or 60 Wave plugins, because you would buy the silver or the platinum bundle or the gold bundle and they would give you all these trash plugins. But if you really wanted the really great stuff, you have to get the platinum bundle, right? I also had UAD plugins, really good plugins. So Waves have some really good plugins as well. But with the UAD plugins, great plugins, a lot of times I noticed that when I was using multiple UAD plugins, my system was taxed. And I always have great bubbled up computer systems, everything is bubbled up, RAM, storage, everything. So I don't know why the whole UAD plugins things didn't work for me. So what I've done in the past year was I got rid of all of my third-party plugins, all of my Wave plugins, all of my UAD plugins. But I kept one plugin. It's a plugin bundle. I kept one, and I'm going to talk to you about that. But first, I want to just talk about some of the plugins that are available in the two DAWs that I use, which are Logic Pro and also Studio One. So let's take a look at that. Okay, here we are with Logic Pro. Logic Pro is an awesome DAW. I used this DAW for a good 10 to 15 years before moving over to Studio One. And I still have Logic, but I mostly use Studio One. So if you look at some of these plugins here, like just any and everything that they offer with Logic Pro. The instruments, the effects, the instruments are just bananas, right? And there are a lot of third-party, sort of instrument plugins as well. So yeah, you have all this sort of cool stuff. They have stem separation too. All of them, most of them have stem separation. I'm not sure. I know that Logic Pro and Studio One has stem separation. Obviously spatial audio, because that's a big thing with Apple. And then if you go into the instruments, and again, you don't necessarily need to purchase instrument plugins, third-party plugins, because a lot of these instrument plugins, stock plugins with some of these DAWs, specifically Logic and Presonus, are pretty good. You have this sample alchemy. You have the sampler, right? Look at this thing here. This is like, is this thing like too overwhelming? Would you be completely overwhelmed with this? I don't think so. This looks like a lot of fun. It is a lot of fun. And then you just have the quick sampler here as well. And then a whole bunch of other stuff. The drum designer, which is pretty cool. The drum machine designer, that's cool. I think Persona Studio One has something a little better with impact. But yeah, you have all this stuff, right? And then if you get into, let's just go into some of the plugins that they have, the actual effects plugins. So first of all, Mastering Assistant. This is something new, not crazy new, but new. Apple added that. The beat breaker, which is pretty cool. All this stuff, right? The reverb is dope. The pitch correction is pretty cool. Do you need Melodyne if you have this really cool pitch correction? I don't know, because I don't use Melodyne, the vintage EQ, which is kind of, the vintage EQ is dope. And then they have the vintage tube EQ, which is really, really sick. I've used them. The vintage console EQ, really, really sick. Totally dope. I love this compressor. This Logic stock plugin compressor is pretty cool. And the Space Designer, oh my goodness, the Space Designer is, forget about it. You use that along with the channel EQ and the Space Designer. Really, really hot stuff. And they just have a lot of different sort of plugins, and they have a crazy sound library as well. Now, if you go over to Studio One, right? Let's just go here. Studio One is just, I don't know if there's any other DAW that's better than Studio One, to be honest with you. I've been using Studio One since the first generation. Now we're on the 7th generation. This thing has just gotten every version, even some of the updates between version updates, right? Every version of Studio One has just like moved the needle further and further and further ahead. Studio One is just way beyond the competition. Cool thing about with 7 is they have a Splice integration now, so you can basically integrate your Splice account with Studio One. That's kind of sick, right? The stem separation, that's kind of dope too. It's actually really, really sick. And they do a really good job. It's not like a lot of times when you have AI powered stem separators, sometimes you have this garbly, goobly sort of stuff that's going on like in a background of the actual separated stem, sort of like with Serato sometimes. You don't have that with this here because, these developers, they know what they're doing. All of these things you can do with Studio One. Obviously with everyone else, with any other DAW, right? But the mastering you can do right within Studio One as well. It's called a project page, right? And I like to pull up a specific plugin for the project page when I'm doing mastering that I'm going to talk about shortly. And then you have all this other stuff, if you're a writer, if you read music, this is it right here. And then the effects plugins, you have what do you have here? You have the phase meter. Let's see what else here. All of this stuff. I'm not even going to go through everything. It's just really crazy. But I will say one of the dopest plugins, the console shaper is pretty dope too. But the fat channel is just, the fat channel is, it's just dope. And then Personas also has what they call mix effects. And these are effects that work on, your bus or, your mastering chain. And they just, wow. Talk about vintage sounds. Forget about it. And then you have all the instruments as well, And again, sample 1 is dope. Impact is My Tie is dope. Impact is dope. So what I want to talk about, first of all, again, like I said, I got rid of all of my Waves plugins, all of my UAD plugins, but I kept one plugin. So I got rid of all of my third-party plugins and I kept one plugin. The one plugin that I did decide to keep, and again, it's a bundle, iZotope Music Production Suite, version 7. Now, I've been playing around with this music production, this specific iZotope bundle, iZotope is owned by Native Instruments, by the way. So I've been dealing with this specifically for years, right? And I love it because it's just everything that I need is right there. What's included in the bundle are 2 plugins that I specifically love. And that is the Ozone 11 Advanced and also the RX 11 Standard. But you also have Native Instruments effects. You have the Brainworks stuff, you have the Nectar, you have the Symphony, all of this stuff. You have all of these plugins included in this bundle for $599, $600. And here's the thing, just go onto the iZotope website. You can get this stuff cheap. If you purchase the Ozone 11 Advanced and the RX 11 Standard, that's $600, and that's only 2 plugins. But if you get the bundle, it's $600, so it makes really a lot of sense to do that. One of the interesting things about Ozone 11 is they once had a standalone. This was around, I remember playing around with it when it was version 8 and version 9. But around version 10, they got rid of the standalone, which, I'm kind of sad, but I can understand why they did that. But these are all the plugins that come with the bundle. This is one of the most fabulous plugin bundles I've ever played around with. And here's the other really cool thing about iZotope and the Music Production Suite 7 bundle. Man, it is light on the system. It is really light. Now, mind you, I'm only using right now Ozone 11 Advanced and RX 11 Standard. I'm about to install all of these other plugins, specifically some of the Native Instruments plugins, because those plugins are pretty cool. You really got to just give it to Native Instruments in terms of their plugins. So one of the reasons I think that stock plugins have caught up to third-party plugins is because the developers with these DAWs, they're just like, hey, these people who are buying our DAWs, they're not using our stock plugins. They're going to these other companies for third-party plugins. So there was a level of competition there when it comes to developers, right? That's just how it works in the tech space, right? So they were like, hey, you know what? they're blowing us out the water. So why not make better stock plugins so that, our customers don't have to go outside of, our product to use plugins? And that's what they've done. Over the years, the stock plugins on some of these DAWs, like specifically Logic and Persona Studio One, they've just gotten better. And the question you have to ask yourself is, how much money are you going to spend on third-party plugins? I remember back in the day when you went to a recording studio, this was when, Pro Tools had it on lock. They had it on lock, right? And Pro Tools was about to switch over to a major version update. All these studio heads had all of these fabulous third-party plugins that worked with that specific version. The new version would have knocked out all those plugins. So a lot of these studios, they kept using the older version of Pro Tools because they wanted to continue using their plugins. Another thing you have to remember back in the day was when you got a DAW, when you got a digital audio workstation, a lot of times they didn't really come with a lot of plugins. I remember like Pro Tools, when I got Pro Tools, I think it was the 888 rig or something like that. I forget what it is, right? But it was an audio interface, right? Innate in and out audio interface. And it gave you Pro Tools and everything else, right? I produced my first album using that rig. When you bought DAWs back in the day, you only got a few effects plugins. And it was rare that you got instrument plugins. Pro Tools was notorious for not giving you everything. They would give you this and say, hey, a la carte, go buy this, that, and the other. Now, fast forward today, when you buy a DAW, you get instrument plugins, you get effects plugins. And the other thing you have to consider is this. Let's just say you went out and you bought like the Fab Filter. That's, like $180, $200, right? The Fab Filter EQ for $200. But you have a really great stock EQ plugin in Logic. You have a really awesome stock EQ plugin in Persona Studio One. You have to start asking yourself that, because I remember I just saw that I was spending thousands of dollars on plugins, third-party plugins. I mean, I was trying to get all the SSL, all the Neves, all those sort of plugins, And then you have like the plugin brigade, on YouTube that's like, oh, this is the best compression plugin, this is the best EQ plugin. The best compression plugin and the best EQ plugin is the one that sounds good to you, the one that's going to shape your music the way you want it to be shaped, the way you want it to be sound, not based on what some YouTuber is telling you, right? And even in my case, I'm telling you that I really like the iZotope Music Production Suite 7 plugin bundle. Don't take my advice, just like I'm telling you what I've done. I got rid of all my third-party plugins except one, and that's the one I use because that's the one that makes sense to me. That's the one that shapes my music the way I want it to sound, right? And like again, like I said, it's very light on the system. So, and you can get the iZotope, any of the iZotope plugins, but just go onto their websites. A lot of times they have great sales. You can go check them out, buy this stuff on a cheap, because again, if you buy Ozone 11 Advanced and RX 11 Standard separately, that's $600. But if you bought the Music Production Suite 7 iZotope bundle, that's only $600, and you get about 11 to like 15 plugins within this bundle. So it's great. So I just wanted to pop on and talk to you about stock plugins versus third-party plugins in iZotope's Music Production Suite 7. Great plugin. Go check it out. Well, there you have it. Until next time, peace.